invite you to attend a meeting on Monday next week to speak for 5 minutes on the Procurator Fiscal role in deciding not to press charges against Glasgow Labour Councillors on 5 separate occasions where it is believed they broke the law. The Councillor Stephen Purcell case concerning allegations of drug misuse, and equally significantly allegations which, according to press reports, the PF office became aware of, which are not in the public domain, and they remain not in the public domain. We don't know what they are, but we know that the PF office received further complaints about Purcell. The threats, the reports of threats and sexual harassment by Councillor Gilbert Davidson, which we understand were handed to the PF office, so obviously quite serious there. 3, the incident of public indecency involving Councillor Stephen Curran and Anne McTaggart MSP. Perhaps not, you know, it's not to draw on the moral point, but the fact is that other people would be treated differently in similar circumstances. The allegations that Councillor Ruth Black embezzled large sums of money from an LGBT centre that she ran. The recent incident of public indecency involving Councillor Matson. We also understand that Councillor Bratt is under investigation. We are concerned to see that councillors are not above prosecution. Invited speakers will be given 5 minutes each. They could be speaking right now. This is a ticketed members meeting and so on. So we've got 3 minutes. Perhaps they'll show up.
I think it's only fair that we should give them the time, because Gordon Matheson might be a bit late because he's still trying to get the grass stains off his knees.
Redmond's off the long wing.
Okay, they've tried our patience for long enough. I'd like to invite James from Unite.
Okay, thanks Nick. My name's James Nesbitt. I live in Calton. I'm a member of Unite the Union, and I'm the co-chair of the Glasgow branch of Unite Community, new community membership scheme. That's open to anybody, whether you're in work or not, if you're a pensioner, a student, unemployed and so on. So I'll get that plug in first and foremost. We've been very active over the last few months trying to cast light on the Ronnie Saez case. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with what went on. I'll just go over it briefly. Ronnie Saez was the previous chief executive of the Glasgow East Regeneration Agency. He worked there from 2007 after a long career as a well-paid bureaucrat in the council. The regeneration agencies, there were 5 of them in Glasgow, and were merged into one for all of Glasgow 2 years ago, which meant some of the high regions lost their positions and were given compensation packages as a result. In Mr Saez's case, his package came to over £500,000, which, as you can imagine, caused quite a stir in the East End. Many people have looked into that since, including the Scottish Charities Register. Oscar. Now, it transpired that of a £500,000 payment, a component of that was discretionary, between £208,000 and £232,000, i.e. there was no contractual obligation for him to be given it. That was a decision that was made by the board, the trustees who ran it as a charity. The investigation of membership to the board shows that there was 5 people who made the decision to make that very generous payment. 3 of them were sitting councillors on Glasgow City Council, all Labour councillors. One of them is no longer on the council, 2 still are, namely George Redmond and James Coleman. The regulatory body who investigated this were quite clear that it was inappropriate and over-generous and related to a breach in trust by the office bearers who carried that out. Unfortunately, that particular body didn't have any powers to reclaim the money, and so they referred it to a body who did. At that point, for whatever reason, no action was taken. But I think we can all agree that in a part of the city where people are suffering badly from public sector cuts, where we've seen the Accord Centre threatened closure, and we've seen now got Oscar's after school care threatened closure, £500,000 golden handshake to a bureaucrat is not an acceptable use of taxpayers' money. It's our money. We live in a democracy, supposedly. We pay our taxes. We've got a right to know what's done with that money. And I think we would all expect the money should be used for the community's benefit. And that clearly has not happened on this occasion. I think in the 21st century, it's increasingly difficult for dodgy deals like this, which I'm sure go on, in many other parts of the country as well. But they've been well and truly rumbled this time. Between the Freedom of Information Acts and, of course, just the internet and activism like we're seeing here tonight, these things can't be kept secret, and those who are responsible for carrying out these criminal acts need to be held to account. And so I hope that from tonight we can look forward to what we're going to do to make sure that money is brought back to the people of the East End of Glasgow where it belongs and spent for our benefit. Up to now, the official investigations haven't quite got there in terms of making that happen, but I'm very confident that with continued action, continued pressure, we can hold them to account and we'll get justice in this campaign.
Thanks everybody for coming along. I suppose what I'm going to talk about really is what I would see as something that's quite systematic in terms of housing and property, speculation, privatisation of housing. So I'm going to talk about compulsory purchase orders. Margaret Jaconelli's here, who I guess probably most people will know about, so I'll leave maybe Margaret to chip in. I think she's coming on after. I'm going to talk a little bit about the legal process of compulsory purchase. So compulsory purchase has more than ever become a tool of gentrification in property development. Increasingly, if you look around at the development that's going on in the East End, you won't see factories. You won't see that anywhere in Britain because we don't really produce anything in Britain now. So people make profit through property. So increasingly the tools to establish that profit have been opened up and diversified, and compulsory purchase is one of them. So compulsory purchase orders go back to the Land Clauses Consolidation Act of 1845. And these have been continually updated. Local authorities, for instance, were granted powers of compulsory purchase in the 1947 Town and Country Planning Act. And these powers were often used to benefit poorer residents, actually, in the post-war era. And we can argue about the benefits of that, but in public and social housing on a mass scale, slum landlords were increasingly expropriated of their property so that mass construction of public housing could take place. But what marks the most recent turn in use of compulsory purchase powers is the contemporary context of property speculation and neoliberal urban policy. So Owen Hatherley probably very neatly described this as slum clearance without socialism. All of this is allegedly done in the name of economic and social well-being, a concept that's been enshrined in the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act of 2004. Well-being in this context is defined as being in the public interest. So arguments for compulsory purchase are always heavily laced with public interest sentiments, but most forms of compulsory purchase were to rechannel public funds into private hands, and that's what I would argue is happening in the case of Margaret Jaconelli. There's another good example of Donald Trump up in Aberdeenshire in the golf course there. In a recent test case in the US, the Supreme Court held that economic development could be advanced as an appropriate interpretation of the public interest, and I think that's the kind of key to understanding how compulsory purchase operates. So in the current context, Glasgow City Council, of course, has led the way in gentrification since the early 80s, and if anybody's interested in tracing that development, could look at, say, Glasgow Action, which was the first public-private partnership in urban regeneration in the 80s, and the Merchant City development took place after that. So it comes as no surprise that the Council has led to a shift in expanding the use of CPOs in urban development, advancing more orders than any other Scottish local authority in the past 10 years. The Commonwealth Games Act has granted enhanced compulsory purchase powers for local authorities so that land and other interests could be acquired to deliver the Commonwealth Games, all in the interest, of course, of the public good. The Scottish Government has recently completed a review of its compulsory purchase guidance and policy as a result of heavy lobbying by the development industry and a range of development interests, all of whom were heavily involved in redrafting the new policy. In short, CPOs are increasingly being seen and used as a tool for property and business interests, increasingly as well through the Trojan horse of regeneration, which I'm sure probably most people in this room would agree is just a euphemism for gentrification. So Dalmarnock, as I said, Margaret is here and she can express a story and the story of the shopkeepers in Dalmarnock much better than I can. But I just want to say a little bit about how valuations are made in CPO cases. So in the Scottish system, the law requires a valuation of the property as if there were no scheme. In other words, as if the purchase was not compulsory, as if there were a willing seller and a willing buyer in an open market, and as if the property was not blighted by a development proposal. The valuation is made based on mortgageable value, the amount a bank might lend as a prospective purchaser to buy the property in an open market situation. The valuation takes place on the basis of the state of property and its surrounds after the CPO is confirmed. This, of course, typically, and certainly in the case of Margaret and the shopkeepers, is routinely after a long-term disinvestment in the area and demolition has been confirmed. What did this mean for Jaconelli's and the shopkeepers? It meant the properties were deemed worthless. The buildings were derelict, having been systematically and deliberately disinvested since the early 2000s by the Housing Association and then Glasgow City Council. The surrounding neighbourhood was a construction site thanks to the Commonwealth Games developments. There was no mortgageable value in these properties. So the compensation rates determined by the district valuer were extremely low. And Margaret was initially offered $30,000 for a 2-bedroom property in a tenement building, which is just unfathomable, really, in the context of current property prices. So, on the other hand, and this is maybe coming closer to the basis of what Nick's doing with his meeting, well, Glasgow City Council happily pursued compulsory purchase orders against Margaret Jaconelli and shopkeepers, in other words, poorer working class residents in this area. When it came to the major property developers who owned land just across the road from the Jaconelli family, the approach was different completely. In 2008, at exactly the same time Glasgow City Council was ignoring the requests of the Jaconellis and the shopkeepers to negotiate voluntary acquisition rather than go through compulsory purchase orders, the Council voluntarily agreed to negotiate a series of property deals with prominent city businessmen. To give just 2 examples, The largest was Springfield Properties, the shell company of Charles Price, a well-known Glasgow-based developer. Springfield Properties had purchased some vacant former industrial sites along Springfield Road, but by 2008, happily and fortuitously for them, sat squarely in the centre of the planned Commonwealth Games Village. The land was bought by Price in 2005 and 2006 for a total of £3.37 million. The deal struck by Glasgow City Council in 2008 was for £19 million for the land he owned, which was deemed to be needed for the Athletes Village. A deal that has since been investigated by Strathclyde Police. Second example, at the end of what was then Millerfield Road, there was a parcel of derelict land owned by Graham Duffy through his company Grantley Developments. The land had been purchased in 1988 for £45,000 at around the same time the Jaconelli family were purchasing a small flat in Lee Street. Duffy made various attempts to develop this land, including a proposal for a 55-storey tower of luxury apartments, hotel and commercial development, which for a while was dubbed the centrepiece of Clyde Gateway's redevelopment plan. In 2008, just as it began pursuing a CPO against the Jaconellis, Glasgow City Council paid Grantley Developments a total of £5.5 million, so from 45,000 initial investment. Another example worth noting is Willie Hawhey, and this was with the M74 construction, which the Games event is typically sort of what happened before the Games and the Gateway regeneration. It's typically been seen as part of the legacy, even though it went about 450 million over budget. So, despite an independent valuation of 7.4 million, Willie Hawhey received 17 million in compensation for his business premises. So the obvious question, I suppose, all this raises, time? Should I finish? Okay, that's fine. Is why weren't CPOs used in these cases in the public interest when they were clearly used? We could have been saved by a massive amount of public expenditure very, very easily by just insisting on a CPO, which we did with Margaret Jaconelli. I mean, the obvious answer, I think, is that the Games are bogus.
Many thanks.
When a lot of people don't understand, when the council came in and said that they were coming in to demolish round about me, we were sitting waiting for them to come in to buy their place. People thought we were sitting out looking for big money. We were sitting out looking for market value and a percentage for relocation. But we ended up, when we contacted them, they kept saying, we're not in a position to negotiate with you. You'll need to wait till it's the appropriate time. But we thought the council were all the good guys, and it wouldn't happen in the 21st century in Scotland that the council would come in and steal somebody's place off them. So about 5 letters came for them. We answered the 5 letters the same. We've been in a car smash, we can't negotiate with you. They're off sick, various different excuses all came back and forward for the council. So when they got the CPO, that was it. We were in a no scheme world. It's called a no scheme world. It means you're worth nothing. So that day when they came to evict us was one of the worst days of our life, because we were losing everything. A house that we'd been in for 1976, and we had to be determined to fight them. And people were saying, why did you barricade yourself in your house? I had to, it was my house. And it was the only home I knew for 1976. And that was it. And it wasn't a day, it was at the end of the day, they told us that day that if we pursued and barricaded ourselves in the house, they were going to sue us for holding up the games. They said, well, on you go, we've not got any money. You can sue us because we've got no money. And we weren't going to get any money, and today we're still fighting to get our compensation. But we've managed to get it to the 90,000. What is market value? If we get it, then we're going to watch, because we were getting hit with 30. But as for the local businesses, there's one local business who had the most thriving business in Kilmarnock. His shop was burnt out with the local councillor's family because he would have been getting the there'd be the first auction of the shop in the area. Now his business would be he earned £100,000 a year profit, and he's proved it. The council are offering him £10,000. So we've had to go down different routes. This guy's going to do the road of the land tribunal. I'm going down the road of Strasbourg. My local councillor never came in to help us. They told us to take it on the chin. So I'm taking it on the chin all the way to Strasbourg. And I'll keep going till I get justice. No for me, for every single person under CPO. I can give you a list of people that's died, took breakdowns and everything under CPO. And that's what regeneration does to the people. So all we've got to do is keep fighting and hope. And this new bedroom tax thing that's coming in, the people don't realise the eviction, you get took to an eviction court. I was took to an eviction court. The eviction court, I own my house, but the council still took me to an eviction court. And these people, I watched them, and I was sitting going, oh, that poor soul's getting evicted for her house. No realising, I was the next one going up to fight a QC for to get evicted from my house. And that's it, you've just got to keep going. All these councillors know what they're doing to the ordinary working people, and you've got to just keep fighting back. And that's what I can do.
Okay.
Going on in terms of that kind of thing, and I just wondered if anyone in the audience would like to make a comment on that at all.
The Accord campaign. We're still fighting, the parents and we're still fighting, we're not giving up. That is another 3-day centres that are closing now. So the kids that were moved out of the Banbury, moved out of the Accord and into the Banbury Community Centre, they're getting hurt again. We're getting told that they have to move out of there. So with the other 3-day centres closing and 350 adults with learning disabilities getting put out of the centre, out of these other centres and the Banbury, we're all joined together and started up a group. Although we're still out in the East End promoting no fighting for the Accord, there's a new Glasgow Day Centre carers campaign that's starting up. We will be there in the May Day, and we've actually got a speaker going up to speak in the May Day march. But the East End is corrupt as well with the councillors. We write letters to the councillors and we don't get any word back. They've just gave up writing, and that's why you're getting rid of you, because they know you'll get fed up and stop writing. So we've got together and started writing again. We've confronted Jim Coleman at Hastings.
Among others.
They just don't care. They think they're above everybody. It's not right. It's not right. And as for Ronnie Saez walking away with all that money, it's terrible. Shocking, so it is. And that's all I can say. I'm here to fight for it and be Margaret, my support, and anybody else in the East End that's out fighting as well.
Actually, we gave 250,000 to the Banbury to open it for our kids, and it's shutting down now, and it's never even been opened a year, just about a year, and we'd like to know where all that money's went to.
250,000.
And they actually gave it a housing association we were going to meetings with, and didn't even realise somebody for that board was sitting on the board we were at the meetings with.
Now, they've bought £20 million worth of land, right? David Murray bought a bit of land for 300,000 and he get 5.6 million for it, right? It's all power station. Stuart McKenna bought a bit of land for £1 and got 1.7 million, but previous to that I already had 1.7 million for the Our Lady of Fatima. Now then Clyde Gateway realised they wanted that. So see, after the council paid 1.7, they gave the land away to Clyde Gateway free. Now the remediation work's all been spent. They've spent about £20 million buying land up to speculators and developers. They've spent about maybe £10 million doing remediation work. And I just got told last week, see the remediation work, now they're selling the land off after paying that to private developers. How did they not let the private developers pay the £15 million remediation work? Why did they do it?
I see our MSP's here, John Mason. I wonder if he'd like to say a few words.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I'm happy to listen a bit longer because I've only just come in, so I'm not quite clear what all's been said.
We were talking about Hill, and one of the reasons for me moving there is that I'm a strong supporter of combined heat and power as a way of providing district heating that alleviates fuel poverty and does it in a collective way. And I think the council had a plan to implement combined heat and power, and it's in their manifesto, their 100 promises. Basically, they said that they would implement combined heat and power across the city. And one of the reasons they could say that and point to that was that the Polmadie recycling plant was to be turned into a plant for district heat, combined heat and power. So they were going to take waste, green waste, and gas, which would then be burned in a power station to provide cheap heating.
Outside of the city, but I've been involved in local politics for 35 years or so. And the thing that's been clear to me for a long time is that the problem we have in Glasgow is the Labour Council, or the Labour dominated council. And essentially, for all this time, it's always been well known that Glasgow's got the best councillors that money can buy. But for a long time, it's obvious that they've been in cahoots with all sorts of crooks and thieves and all sorts of other business people. Right back since the days of the Stephen Purcell situation, which as we all know has been carefully just put to rest and shoved under the covers. Now, I'm aware that the SNP members of the council have tried very hard to make Labour accountable for all the things that's going on. But that's the problem that we've got here tonight. How are we going to make these people accountable? Especially when you have a meeting and they're invited to come to the meeting and they just don't bother. So how are we actually going to make these people accountable? Is it possible that we should go to the press? Because the press has covered quite a number of things in the past, but you would almost think there was some kind of media cover-up, you know. It's not entirely unlikely that the press is in cahoots with the Labour councillors, because I'm quite sure a lot of other people are. So I think this should be the focus of the meeting here tonight. How do we actually deal with it? And I know one of my friends here has got a suggestion, which I think is quite a good one, that might be worth hearing, you know. Ronnie, would you like to say what you were thinking about?
I've actually made a suggestion of taking out a private prosecution. It just came to me when I was listening to you speaking. And the only reason I've made that is in the recent couple of years I've had personally had to meet with members of the Crown Office, and it was them that raised and explained what a private prosecution is. And basically what it is when the Crown don't have enough evidence to guarantee a conviction. But that doesn't mean to say that the person or the accused person can't get taken to court. It just means that the Crown Office will not put to expense an accused person going through a trial unless there's nearly 100% chance of conviction. So my idea was take out a private prosecution, either against one member as an example, or possibly a couple, maybe more impact having a couple at the same time.
I think the problem with a private prosecution model is the enormous cost. Even the research work is very expensive. And the fact that, according to the Procurator Fiscal's, shall we say, explanation of certain issues, particularly Gordon Matheson, who was without fail caught in flagrante, right, in a public place, they say that no crime was committed. So it's very difficult to take a prosecution if they've already made up their mind that nothing happened. That's the difficulty. And it's also very, very expensive.
I know, it was just an idea.
I know it's a good idea, but the fact is that first and foremost we need to get a QC's opinion, council's opinion, which even with the most nicest of QC's would be £2,000 and rising. So that's the difficulty we've got as a group.
On that note, I think that is definitely something that we need to pursue with as much as
You're some of the best researchers in the room. Researchers, they wouldn't have done. Lots of us are used to researching, you know, it's something that we could all combine and do. The money could potentially be an issue. But I think actually it's not something like the dogging or whatever he was doing, because that's, you know, it's something there that's more substantial to do with the public interest today.
Basically, where I'm going to take that just now, you know, we heard what happened in terms of the 5 cases that were referred to the PF, and the Fiscal decided they didn't want to pursue them. But I mean, the footballer Gary O'Connor, he was sentenced to community payback order for possession of cocaine. Now, you can look at that, and you can look at the Purcell thing, and you've got 2 high-profile cases, and they're treated completely differently. And I think that is worth pointing out again and again and again. Yeah. You've got the financier David Fleming, who was fined and placed on the sex offenders register for a public indecency on Sulky Hall Street. Again, you know, you've got the 2 cases, Stephen Curran, Anne McTaggart MSP, and Gordon Mattison, treated completely differently to financier David Fleming. You know. And then you have J&M Services, who were fined £27,000 for sexual harassment. And I can look at Gilbert Davidson, not just once but several times referred to the PF, no action taken, but this particular company was fined £27,000, and rightly so, but you know. Susan Forsyth, Glasgow social worker, she pocketed some benefits and she was ordered to pay £20,000. So you can look at what happened with Ruth Black and the embezzlement that took place there, and the complete difference. So we basically got, you know, it appears that we have 2 laws going on, and you're right that there are some very good researchers going on, and what I will say is that I don't think the Ronnie Saez payout and his connection with Jim Coleman and George Redmond is unique. I think there are other connections as well, and those should be pursued. Yeah. I'd like to open the floor for any questions or comments as well now.
Well, on that note, Nick.
That way, we raise the level of publicity, the element of fear factor, and we'll get publicity, because the Herald, believe it or not, will cover something that Audit Scotland is involved in. I think we need to look at that before we go for private prosecution.
Well, it does sound like a step forward.
Well, that's all I'm saying, because we need to act, because the fact that the turnout isn't that small, you know. There wasn't an awful lot that ran up the steps at the Winter Palace, right? So what I'm saying is, you know, it starts with there. And all I'm saying here is we need to look at what's available, free, and that is Audit Scotland, or even the Commissioner's complaints for local authorities. We've got a colleague who's actually taken out a private complaint against Councillor Matheson.
I think that is a reasonable first step, and certainly I'll take on organising a wee meeting to take that forward.
Thank you very much.
If anyone is interested in doing that, I will put out follow-up from this meeting. Obviously they're being recorded as well, so you know, we should be able to take that forward. Any other hands or comments?
Yeah, I was just going to say that so much of this
is the only one that was offered the council flats. I mean, I'm sure always would have loved to have been offered council flats for £1, but that never happened. So he took these council flats on for £1. He subsequently became a Labour councillor, again through his work, his donations, not for anything he's ever done in the community, that's for sure. But it's something, once, I know Jerry Braden, I think, covered the story in the Herald, and it got a real lot of attention at the time, simply because it's just so unfair.
The reason he was given the flats for the pound was because at the time he swore an undertaking that basically he was getting the flats because he was then going to regenerate them, do them up, put them back to a standard they should be, and then the last I heard he was actually getting reported to Land Services because the place is a tip.